The United States Navy officially called destroyers the safest ships in 1942. They were fast, small, and agile, designed to evade threats and survive encounters that might destroy larger vessels. On paper, it all sounded reassuring. In reality, the story was very different. These ships were packed with young sailors, many barely out of their teens, who were sent into battles that tested not only their skills, but their very endurance. Life aboard a destroyer was a constant balance between fear and duty. The ship's design emphasized speed over protection. Its thin steel hull could not withstand much, and even a single torpedo or a direct bomb hit could spell disaster. Despite this, these vessels were sent into some of the most dangerous theaters of the war, from the cold, stormy North Atlantic to the sun-scorched waters of the Pacific. Many sailors joined the Navy with visions of heroism, adventure, and serving their country, but the reality quickly shattered any illusions. Day after day, they faced the constant hum of engines, the pitch of metal under tension, and the knowledge that at any moment the ship could be struck. Destroyers were often on the front lines, acting as escorts for convoys of supply ships. These convoys were prime targets for enemy submarines, and the sailors knew that one mistake could cost them their lives. Even with the Navy's promise of safety, statistics told another story. Casualty rates for destroyer crews were disproportionately high. Ships like the Fletcher class, considered among the most advanced destroyers of the era, still faced incredible risks. Submarine attacks, aerial bombings, and surface engagements were constant threats. The interior of a destroyer was a world unto itself. Compartments were cramped and noisy, with barely enough room to move. Sailors slept in hammocks, often in shifts that allowed little rest. Meals were hurried and simple, eaten while listening to the metallic groans of a vessel cutting through the waves. Yet even in these harsh conditions, camaraderie formed. Young men leaned on each other for support, sharing stories, jokes, and quiet moments of relief whenever possible. The tension was palpable. A sudden alert or the flash of a distant explosion could send the crew scrambling, testing every ounce of their training. Many sailors reported the psychological strain was as severe as any physical danger they faced. Despite the danger, there was pride in serving aboard a destroyer. These ships were fast, maneuverable, and essential to the Navy's operations. They were the workhorses, performing escort missions, hunting submarines, and protecting larger capital ships. Their speed and agility often allowed them to avoid destruction, but the margin for error was slim. Even the most experienced crew could find themselves caught in a deadly situation. Each mission was a test of endurance, requiring courage, discipline, and sometimes sheer luck. The stories of destroyer crews reveal the human side of war. Letters home often contained little of the danger they faced, shielding families from the harsh reality. Sailors recounted narrow escapes, intense battles, and the quiet moments between engagements. Many described the constant awareness of mortality, knowing that any day could be their last at sea. Yet they carried on, driven by duty, loyalty, and a commitment to their shipmates. In understanding the life aboard these vessels, one begins to grasp the full scope of the challenges faced by the young men who served. The image of a destroyer as a safe ship was a comforting myth, but the reality was far more complex, demanding resilience, courage, and a relentless spirit from those who called it home.
Destroyers were marvels of speed and maneuverability, but that speed came at a cost. Their thin steel hulls offered almost no protection against the weapons of war. A single torpedo from a German U-boat or a Japanese bomber could tear a destroyer apart in seconds. The men who served aboard them understood the danger, yet they had little choice but to carry out missions that put them in the line of fire repeatedly. These ships often escorted convoys across the Atlantic, where German submarines lurked beneath the cold, dark waves, waiting for a chance to strike. Sailors knew that even a single mistake in navigation or timing could mean disaster for the entire convoy. Life aboard a destroyer was a delicate balance between constant vigilance and exhaustion. Crews worked in shifts, sleeping only a few hours at a time. The engines roared day and night, and the vibrations ran through every deck, every bulkhead, leaving no corner of the ship free from noise. Below deck, compartments were crowded and oppressive. Sailors shared narrow bunks, and the smell of fuel, sweat, and metal was ever present. Even simple tasks could feel monumental under these conditions. Yet, amid the chaos, the crew developed a rhythm, a silent understanding of one another's movements, almost as if the ship itself had become a living entity responding to their collective will. The threats they faced were relentless. Submarines were the most feared. A torpedo could strike without warning, and destroyers had to constantly scan the waters, listening for the faintest hint of an enemy. Depth charges became a common part of life, dropped with precision to protect larger ships and convoys, while sailors braced for the shock waves reverberating through the hull. A destroyer could survive one attack, sometimes even two, but the more it was exposed, the higher the odds of catastrophe. Air attacks were just as dangerous. Kamikaze pilots in the Pacific, bombers in the Atlantic, each strike bringing the risk of fire, flooding, and casualties. Sailors learned quickly that their ship's agility could only save them so much. Despite these dangers, destroyers were indispensable. They patrolled the front lines, screening battleships, carriers, and supply ships. Their speed allowed them to chase submarines or dodge incoming fire, but missions were often long and grueling. Weeks at sea, punctuated by combat, left sailors mentally and physically drained. They fought fatigue with sheer determination, adrenaline, and an unspoken bond that grew stronger with each passing day. Many recounted moments when the danger felt overwhelming, yet the crew carried on, driven by the knowledge that their shipmates' lives depended on them. In addition to combat, destroyers faced the challenges of the natural world. Storms in the North Atlantic could toss a ship like a toy, sending sailors sprawling across decks slicked with seawater. Waves slammed against the hull, flooding compartments and threatening stability. Even in calmer seas, the constant motion, the noise, and the tight quarters wore on every man aboard. The psychological toll was immense, but these sailors adapted, relying on routines, drills, and the support of each other to survive. Stories from the deck reveal both terror and courage. Men described moments when depth charges shook the ship, when lookouts spotted periscopes slicing through the waves, and when anti-aircraft guns blazed against incoming planes. Some lived to tell stories of narrowly evading death, while others paid the ultimate price. Every mission demanded skill, endurance, and nerves of steel. Each destroyer carried not just sailors, but the weight of countless lives depending on them, a responsibility that could not be ignored. By understanding the dangers faced on these ships, it becomes clear that the image of destroyers as safe was far from the truth. They were vulnerable, overworked, and exposed to constant threats from enemy forces and nature alike. Yet the young men who served aboard them adapted, survived, and carried on with a resilience that few could imagine. They learned quickly that life on a destroyer was a test of endurance, courage, and loyalty, a relentless trial where every day could be the difference between life and death. The thin steel hulls held more than just machinery. They carried the hearts and minds of men who would face some of the most terrifying realities of World War II.
Life aboard a destroyer was relentless, and the young sailors quickly learned that there was no real respite. Missions often lasted weeks, with little time for rest or even simple personal moments. Convoy duty, anti-submarine patrols, screening aircraft carriers, all demanded constant alertness. Every sailor, from the newest recruit to the most seasoned petty officer, had to be ready at a moment's notice. Sleep was a luxury they could rarely afford. Many men reported surviving on just a few hours of rest at a time, often interrupted by alarms, incoming attacks, or the simple hum of engines that never stopped. Exhaustion became a constant companion, wearing down both body and mind.
The mental strain was just as dangerous as the physical threats. Sailors had to remain vigilant, scanning the horizon and the seas below for submarines, mines, or enemy aircraft. A single misstep could cost lives, and the awareness of that fact was ever present. Despite the fear, crews developed an almost instinctual coordination, each man understanding his role and trusting his shipmates completely. The cramped conditions below deck compounded the stress. Compartments were hot, damp, and crowded, with equipment, machinery, and the smell of fuel and salt water ever present. Hammocks were packed tightly, offering little comfort or privacy, and the noise of the ship's engines echoed through every bulkhead. Even during brief moments of calm, there was no true escape from the environment. The duties themselves were physically demanding. Loading and firing the ship's guns required strength and precision. Running up and down narrow ladders during an alert tested stamina, especially while carrying equipment or ammunition. Handling depth charges or performing maintenance under pressure demanded focus, often in near darkness or while the ship pitched violently in rough seas. Every task, no matter how routine it seemed, could quickly turn into a life-or-death situation. Fatigue and fear were constant adversaries, yet the crew pressed on, driven by necessity and the unspoken understanding that the lives of their shipmates depended on their performance. Despite the hardships, moments of quiet camaraderie emerged. Sailors shared stories, letters, and small acts of kindness, which provided temporary relief from the constant tension. Laughter and joking became coping mechanisms, a way to maintain sanity amid the chaos. Brotherhood aboard the destroyer was forged in the crucible of shared danger and shared responsibility. These bonds were often the difference between despair and resilience, giving men the strength to endure what would have been unbearable alone. Every mission brought new challenges. Storms could strike without warning, tossing the ship violently, flooding compartments, and leaving crews scrambling to maintain stability. Enemy attacks were always a threat, with submarines lurking beneath the waves or planes swooping from the sky. The combination of combat stress, environmental danger, and extreme fatigue created an atmosphere of relentless tension. Yet destroyers were expected to continue their duties, escorting convoys, protecting carriers, and seeking out enemy forces. There was no room for hesitation, no opportunity to rest, and no escape from the demands of war. Even in these extreme conditions, sailors learned to adapt. Drills and routines became lifelines, providing structure in a chaotic environment. Each man had to understand not only his own role, but also how it connected to every other crew member. Communication, precision, and discipline were vital. Mistakes could be catastrophic, but adherence to training and trust in each other allowed these small ships to perform missions that seemed impossible. The life of a destroyer sailor was a constant test of endurance, mental fortitude, and courage under pressure. By the end of long missions, sailors were exhausted but often hardened by experience. They had witnessed the destructive power of war, faced near-death situations, and survived where others did not. The psychological toll was immense, yet the sense of purpose and responsibility drove them forward. Every day aboard a destroyer required resilience, skill, and nerves of steel. The work was grueling, the dangers constant, but through it all, these men endured. Their courage and determination allowed destroyers to fulfill roles critical to the war effort, proving that the true strength of these ships lay not in their steel, guns, or speed, but in the extraordinary endurance of the sailors who served aboard them.
When battle came, life aboard a destroyer became pure chaos. The calm of routine vanished, replaced by blaring alarms, smoke, and the roar of explosions. A torpedo strike could hit without warning, tearing through the hull and sending water rushing into compartments. Sailors scrambled to man guns, seal bulkheads, or help wounded shipmates. Every second mattered. Training and instinct took over, but even the best prepared crew could feel the sting of fear gripping their hearts. In the Pacific, kamikaze attacks added a new terror. Planes dove directly at ships, engines screaming, fire and smoke trailing behind them.
The impact of even a single aircraft could set a destroyer ablaze, sending men flying and flooding decks with flames and debris. The decks, usually orderly, became a battlefield in themselves. Flooding, fire, and debris made every action dangerous. Crew members worked in teams to control fires, pump out water, and stabilize the ship. The sound of metal twisting, the shriek of engines, and the cries of injured sailors created a sensory overload that tested the limits of endurance. Even when the immediate danger passed, the damage had to be assessed and repaired under pressure, often while still exposed to enemy attacks. In the Atlantic, encounters with German U-boats added another layer of peril. Depth charges shook the ship, sending reverberations through every deck. Lookouts scanned for periscopes, listening for the faintest hum of an enemy vessel. One miscalculation, 1 second of hesitation could result in catastrophic loss. The speed and maneuverability of destroyers were their primary defenses. Captains had to think quickly, plotting evasive courses while coordinating gunfire, depth charges, and damage control. The crew relied on drills honed over weeks and months, but the unpredictability of combat meant that even experienced sailors could face moments of pure terror. Many recounted the surreal sensation of seeing explosions near their ship, feeling the shock waves ripple through the deck, and knowing that death was only inches away. Fires erupted without warning, ammunition threatened to detonate, and the hull could bend under the force of impact. There was little time to think, only to act. Despite the danger, moments of extraordinary heroism appeared amid the chaos. Sailors risked their lives to save injured shipmates, fight fires, or repair critical systems while the ship lurched and shuddered around them. Every action could determine the survival of the vessel and the men aboard it. These acts of bravery, often quiet and unheralded, became the backbone of the destroyer's survival. Casualties were high, yet the crews persisted, driven by a sense of duty, camaraderie, and the knowledge that their shipmates depended on them completely. Even after surviving an attack, destroyers were often far from safe. Damage control could take hours, and the threat of follow-up strikes was constant. Sailors had to remain alert, exhausted but ready for the next wave of danger. Storms, enemy aircraft, submarines, and mines added layers of unpredictability to every mission. The psychological impact was profound. Sailors lived with a constant awareness of mortality, knowing that even a brief lapse in concentration could be fatal. Yet, amid the fear, routines and discipline provided structure. Every crew member understood their role, and every action was vital to the survival of the ship. The terrifying reality of combat aboard a destroyer showed that these vessels, despite their speed and agility, were far from invincible. They carried men into the heart of danger repeatedly, testing endurance, courage, and the limits of human resilience. For the young sailors, every engagement was a test of character, a trial where fear and duty collided. By facing fire, flooding, and the chaos of battle, they proved that the true strength of a destroyer lay not in its steel, guns, or engines, but in the unwavering courage of the men who fought aboard it. Their stories of survival and sacrifice reveal the harsh and extraordinary life of those who served on the most overworked and underprotected ships of the Second World War. Even years later, veterans spoke of the sights, sounds, and smells that stayed with them, the taste of salt and smoke, the roar of engines, and the fleeting moments of panic and relief. These memories, vivid and haunting, underscore the unimaginable reality of war at sea and the remarkable resilience of those who endured it.
After months at sea, after enduring storms, relentless patrols, and the chaos of combat, the young men aboard destroyers developed a resilience few could imagine. They had faced death repeatedly, yet continued their missions with unwavering determination. Life aboard these ships was harsh and unrelenting, but there was a purpose that carried them forward. Brotherhood became a lifeline.
Sailors relied on one another for survival, for morale, and for the small comforts that made the impossible life aboard a destroyer bearable. Simple acts, a shared meal, a whispered joke, or helping a comrade through a flooded compartment took on monumental importance. In those moments, the ship became more than steel and machinery. It became a home, a refuge, and a symbol of endurance against overwhelming odds. The casualty rates among destroyer crews were higher than many imagined. Even the most agile and fast ships could not escape the dangers of modern warfare. Torpedoes, bombs, mines, and relentless enemy attacks could tear a ship apart in minutes. Yet sailors adapted to survive. Training, discipline, and instinct guided their actions, while courage and loyalty gave them the strength to continue when fear threatened to paralyze them. Many survived situations that seemed impossible, returning from attacks battered but unbroken. Each survival became a story of endurance, a testament to the human capacity to face extraordinary danger and continue performing under extreme pressure. The psychological toll of service aboard destroyers cannot be overstated. Sailors lived with the constant awareness that any day could be their last. They faced not only the threat of enemy action, but the relentless stress of exhaustion, cramped living conditions, and the endless hum of engines and machinery. Yet amid this mental strain, men formed unbreakable bonds. They learned to trust one another completely, knowing that their lives depended on it. These bonds, forged in fear and adversity, often lasted a lifetime, long after the war ended. Veterans spoke of these friendships as some of the most profound experiences of their lives, stronger even than the memory of combat itself. Destroyers were often overworked and underprotected, yet their crews accomplished missions critical to the Allied war effort. Escorting convoys, protecting carriers, hunting submarines, each operation was fraught with danger, but essential to victory. Sailors endured long deployments, sometimes in harsh climates, facing storms, ice, and oppressive heat, all while maintaining constant vigilance. Their ability to continue under these conditions was a testament to human resilience. They proved that courage and determination could compensate, at least in part, for the limitations of their vessels. Their perseverance also inspired future generations of sailors, shaping naval training and doctrine long after the war ended. The legacy of destroyer sailors extends far beyond the battles they fought. Their extraordinary endurance, bravery, and sacrifice helped shape the outcome of the war. Stories of narrow escapes, heroic actions, and survival against overwhelming odds continue to inspire generations. Many returned home quietly, carrying memories of comrades lost, the roar of engines, the flash of explosions, and the feeling of a ship sliding through endless waves. They rarely spoke of the hardships, yet their experiences left an indelible mark on naval history. Ultimately, the life aboard a destroyer during World War II was a study in endurance and courage. These ships were small, vulnerable, and overworked, yet they carried some of the most extraordinary men of the era. Through storms, enemy attacks, and constant fatigue, destroyer crews endured, survived, and accomplished missions critical to the war effort. Their story is one of human resilience in the face of near-constant danger, a reminder that the strength of a ship lies not only in its design and weaponry, but in the men who serve aboard it. Even decades later, the memory of their service endures, honoring the courage, sacrifice, and unwavering spirit of those who lived through one of the most dangerous chapters of naval warfare. Their legacy continues to inspire, reminding us of the immense cost of duty and the extraordinary courage of ordinary men pushed to the limits of human endurance.